I'll never forget the night I found out everything I'd worked for was gone in an instant. I came home late, thinking it would be just another quiet night, but when I walked through the door, something felt off. The air was too still. And then I saw it. A thick manila envelope on the kitchen counter. My name scribbled on it in my father's handwriting. My stomach dropped. I didn't even have to open it to know it was bad, but I did anyway. Inside was a legal document, the kind that changes everything. It was a transfer of ownership for the company, a company I had worked for, built, and sacrificed years for. But my name wasn't on it. Angela's was, my sister, Angela. She'd been living her own life, doing her own thing, but now, somehow, she was CEO. I couldn't breathe. I'd given everything to this company, my late nights, missed birthdays, all of it. And for what? I stood there, holding that paper, and realized I was nothing. But that was just the beginning. I had no idea how far this would go. For the next few days, I tried to keep it together. I kept going to work, kept doing what I'd always done. But something had shifted. Angela was in charge now, and I was just there. She walked in like she owned the place, acting like she had been preparing for this her whole life. My father was blind to it. Or maybe he just didn't care anymore. I watched as she made all the decisions, ignored the data, and started rebranding everything. The logo, the colors, the vibe. But the numbers? They didn't matter. It was like I wasn't even part of the company anymore. I'd spent years building it from the ground up. And now Angela, who hadn't lifted a finger in years, was calling the shots. I tried talking to my father, but he'd always have some excuse. Angela's got fresh ideas, he'd say. She's the future of this company. And that's when it hit me. He wasn't blind to this. He had made his choice. He was replacing me with her. But here's the twist. What I was about to do next would change everything for all of us. I thought I could handle it at first. I thought I could just keep my head down and make it work. But then, I saw it. Angela had walked into the office that morning, holding a coffee cup, acting like she owned the place. No, like she had been born to run this company. She waltzed straight to the conference room, where the team had gathered for our usual meeting. And I'll never forget what she said. "Let's talk about branding," she said, grinning like she had just discovered fire. Branding, not numbers, not projections, not strategy. And that's when I realized Angela had no clue what she was doing. She started talking about the company vibe and reaching the younger demographic, all while I sat there, biting my tongue. She was talking about nothing. She didn't even glance at the data I had spent weeks collecting. The figures, the models, I could tell they didn't even interest her. But what did? Her new ideas. She changed everything. The website, the colors, the logo, all of it, just to make it pop. No real understanding of what had been working for years. I watched the team, my team, look at her, nodding like they were all in on the same joke. That's when I realized I wasn't even on the team anymore. So I did the only thing I could do. I took a step back and watched. But what I was about to see next would make me question everything. One afternoon, I had to sit through a presentation Angela was giving to a huge client, the one I had worked with personally for years. The meeting was set up to pitch a new campaign proposal. This was the big one, the one we were counting on to keep things running smoothly. And there she was, Angela, standing at the front of the room with her PowerPoint presentation, flashing those perfectly styled slides. But I could already feel the disaster coming. The numbers didn't make sense. Her analysis was, well, it wasn't analysis. It was just buzzwords strung together to sound like she knew what she was talking about. As the client, Susan, asked her questions, Angela started fumbling. I could feel the tension in the room. Susan wasn't buying it. Angela's smile wavered as she tried to cover up her confusion with another word salad. Then Susan turned to me, the expert, and asked the question. "Camille, can you explain this data?" She looked at me. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't just part of the team anymore. I was the one who was still keeping the company alive. I answered the question calmly, laying out the real strategy behind the numbers. I could feel the room shift. Susan was impressed. Angela, not so much. And that's when it hit me. I had to make my move. This company was mine to rebuild. The next few days after the meeting were a blur. I kept telling myself I was going to make it work, that I could still fix things, that there was time. But the truth was, I was starting to lose it. Every time I walked into the office, I felt smaller. It wasn't just that Angela was taking over, it was that I was being erased. I had sacrificed so much for this company. My best years, gone. Missed weddings, birthdays, entire summers, because I was making deals, fixing problems, keeping things running smoothly. But for what? One night, I sat in my office, staring at my father's old desk. The desk where we had celebrated our first big deal, where he had told me, "One day, Camille, this will all be yours." I picked up his old pen, the one he used to sign all the big contracts. And I thought about how much he had meant to me, how much I had trusted him. But now, it all felt like a lie. I was still working late, still pushing myself to keep things together. But with every passing day, I could feel the weight of the betrayal. My father wasn't just handing over the company. He was handing over my life's work to someone who didn't even understand it. And that's when I realized it wasn't about saving the company anymore. It was about saving myself. But saving myself meant I had to take a risk, a big one. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning. I couldn't. I started reviewing old documents, contracts, client emails, internal strategies. I pulled everything I had ever worked on, every single piece of evidence that proved I was the one who had kept this company afloat. I took my time. I didn't rush. I didn't need to be reckless. I just needed to wait for the right moment. While Angela played CEO, I worked in the shadows, quietly gathering everything I needed to prove that this company wasn't just hers to take. The more I worked, the more confident I became. I knew the numbers better than anyone. I knew the clients, the strategies, the systems I had built. Angela might have the title, but I had the expertise. And then I got the call, the one I had been waiting for, the big client we had been pitching, the one that could make or break everything. It was time. The day of the big pitch came, and I was already on edge. Angela had been hyping it up for weeks, making grand promises to the client, Susan. But I knew better. The proposal was a mess, and I couldn't stand by and let her ruin it. I watched as Angela stood in front of the conference room, presenting her slides, full of flashy graphics but no substance. She was smiling, confident, but I could see right through it. She didn't know the numbers. She didn't even understand the core of the strategy. Then Susan spoke up. She asked the question that made my stomach drop. "Angela, can you explain the data behind the budget allocation? The ROI isn't matching up." Angela froze. The smile faded from her face, and I could see her searching for words. She didn't have an answer. She had nothing. I had been holding my breath, but at that moment, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I stood up, I stepped forward, and calmly explained the strategy, the data behind the projections, and the reasoning behind the budget shift. It was everything Angela had missed, everything she couldn't grasp. The room was quiet, but I could see the shift in Susan's eyes. She knew. Angela tried to salvage it, throwing out more buzzwords, but it was clear she was out of her depth. And Susan? She wasn't buying it. She turned to me, her gaze steady. "Camille," she said, "can you send over your revised proposal by the end of the day? This isn't working for us." That was it. The deal was mine, and Angela knew it. The days after the pitch were pure chaos. Angela was spiraling, trying to salvage whatever she could, but I could feel the cracks showing. The employees were starting to talk, murmuring about how things weren't working out. Clients were pulling back. The company was crumbling, and Angela was struggling to hold it together. My phone started buzzing constantly. My father called first. His voice was frantic. "Camille, you've got to come back. We're losing everything. You have to help us fix this." But there was no apology, no recognition of what had happened, just desperation. Angela sent me a text next, something bitter. "You ruined everything. You set me up for failure." I read it and just shook my head. She was still in denial, still blaming everyone but herself. But I didn't care about her words anymore. I had nothing left to prove. I deleted her message. I didn't respond to my father either. I was done. The next day, I walked into the office. The atmosphere was different. People were looking at me like I was the one who could save the company. And I knew, right then and there, that I was in control now. Angela, she was gone, demoted to a creative role, with no say in anything important. I didn't have to say much. The team knew. They had seen the truth. And that's when everything started to shift. I called the shots now. The clients started coming back. The strategy was back on track. And then I got the call from Susan. Camille, we're moving forward with your proposal. We want to work with you directly. That was it. It was over. I had won. The next morning, I walked into the office with a sense of calm. Things were different now. Angela was nowhere to be found, and the office was eerily quiet. I could feel the weight of the change. I didn't need a big ceremony or grand gestures. I knew what I had to do. I took my place at my father's old desk, his chair now empty, a silent reminder of everything that had led to this moment. The team was waiting for direction. They were all looking at me, the ones who had stayed, the ones who had worked alongside me for years. They knew I had the experience. I didn't need to say much. I just told them what I needed from them and how we were going to move forward. We needed to rebuild. I started restructuring the team, putting people in positions where they could actually succeed. I reorganized the strategy, got rid of the fluff, and brought things back to basics. It didn't take long before we started seeing the change. Clients who had left came back. Employees who had been on the fence started believing in the vision again. The atmosphere lifted. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like the company was finally back on track. The best part? I didn't have to fight for my place anymore. I had earned it. And then the call came in. Susan. Camille, it's Susan. We've reviewed your proposal, and we want to move forward with it. Her voice was steady, and for a second, it felt surreal. We'll be working with you directly. Let's get the paperwork started. That was it. The deal was officially mine. I had done it. As I sat in my new office, looking out over the city, I finally felt the weight of everything that had happened. It was surreal. The chaos, the betrayal, the uncertainty. It was all behind me now. The company was back on track, and I was where I was always meant to be. But I knew it wasn't just about the company. It wasn't about the money or the deal with Susan. It was about something deeper, something more personal. For so long, I had put everything into this company, into proving myself. I had believed in promises that were never kept. I had given up pieces of my life, thinking it was all for something bigger, only to have it taken away from me. But in the end, what I had learned was that you don't need anyone's approval to know your worth. My father, Angela, they could try to define my future, but they didn't control my value. Sometimes, revenge isn't about hurting them. It's about finding peace. And for the first time in a long time, I was at peace with myself. I didn't need to burn any bridges or get even. I didn't need to prove anything to them. I just needed to show up for myself, to step into the role I had always earned, and to make sure I never lost sight of who I really was. They broke me once, but I found my strength again. And I'll never let anyone take that from me.